Martini.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Māori population is a young population, the median age barely reaching 23 years compared to 36.4 years in the total population. Putting it another way, some 34% of the Māori population is under the age of 15. This demographic profile brings with it a special set of priorities which we look for in the budget announcement made last Thursday. When we combined the disproportionately low median income, in mid-2008 this was $500 compared to $530 for the total population, it provides a particular context for this debate. In the health arena, an additional $51 million was allocated to meet the pressure of the very low-cost access program and other primary healthcare services. Why is this important? A very low-cost access payment is to support practices that maintain very low fees, practices that typically serve high-need communities. On top of this, of course, we would expect that the $1.4 billion extra funding for district health boards will also include interventions which reduce health inequalities. When constituents walk in my door, the two biggest issues that they seek help with are either health or education. In education, I think one of the unsung good news stories of this year's budget has been the injection of another $1.9 billion over 4 years, including a 4% increase in operational funding for schools. The challenge is, however, to look past the generalities and see what support is available to meet the areas of highest need and greatest demand. I am therefore really pleased that an additional $91.8 million is being invested in early childhood education participation for families in areas which are underrepresented. The focus is on ensuring that the families in most need get access to these services. The $91 million has been earmarked for Māori, Pacifica and low-income areas out of the total investment of $107 million. There has been a lot said about what could at the very least be described as a contentious decision in this year's budget about early childhood education. But if there is any doubt as to the value of investment being allocated to Māori participation, this week's report from the Education Review Office proved without doubt how vital it is to support and promote early childhood education opportunities for Māori. The Successful Māori Children in Early Childhood Services, released on Monday, reported that nearly 2/3 of early childhood teachers were not focused on helping Māori to become competent and confident learners, and more than half of the services were failing to respond adequately to the expectations of whānau Māori. One of the most pragmatic findings was that playgroups, play centres, kindergartens and other services were failing to set Māori education in a Māori context. It's not breaking news, but all the research tells us that children are taught best when the context makes sense to them. For tamariki Māori, that context is one which responds to them as Māori. The ERO report concluded that there were some key things that centres could do to increase the responsiveness of their service to whānau. They could look at how they consulted whānau. They could ensure they incorporated Māori perspectives into education. They could provide more professional development for educators and managers in working with Māori. And they could evaluate the impact of their programs for Māori. Mr. Speaker, I come back to my starting point of how the budget responds to the particular and unique needs of the Māori population. And while I am in the education sector, I want to also draw attention to the additional $48 million going into Youth Guarantee, which will raise the number of places available next year from 2,000 to 2,500. Another $8.4 million going to help kura retain their secondary school students. Another $12.6 million to help Māori medium schools develop tools to assess the progress of their students. These are all important initiatives which will help to ensure rangatahi Māori are participating achieving and succeeding in school. It will help to pave the way for future employment and further education opportunities, and in that respect help to build a stronger workforce to face our future. Another key initiative that was introduced in Budget 2010 was the investment of $91 million for a new Quality Services Fund for non-government organisations. This is a really important mechanism for supporting our community groups, helping to enhance their capacity and capability and respond to the unique needs of communities across the country. Finally, I want to make some comments about what we may call the unfailing test of a civilisation, and that is how we treat our most vulnerable, our young and our old. Part of the budget package, of course, includes increases of 2.02% for all main benefits, for New Zealand superannuation, for veterans' pensions, and for CPI-adjusted government superannuation fund. That's important, of course, in that it helps to provide immediate compensation for the rise in GST. But for those who receive superannuation or a veteran's pension, there will also be a tax cut on top of the compensation for GST, thereby increasing their after-tax income quite considerably. While such a lot has been said about GST and tax cuts, I received an email yesterday which brought everything back into perspective about Budget 2010. Moira Bramley, responding to one of the releases we issued on Budget Day, shared some of her own unique brand of wisdom to guide our thinking about the difference that Budget Day makes. She said, and I quote, "I understand the reasoning behind the increase in GST and accept we all have to tighten our belts for the sake of those who have no jobs, no fathers or mothers to raise the kids, and although it's going to be hard, there is a way to better the lot of those who will be affected most. If you have a plot of land, and most do wherever they are living, then plant some vegetables. Take cooking lessons and learn to make meals out of nothing. Nourishing meals do not need expensive cuts or expensive ingredients. Op shops have awesome clothing for a few dollars for everyone of all sizes, shoes at $2 per pair. So it is just a matter of reprioritising where your money gives you the best value. But in this country, no one should go hungry or without clothing if they spend their benefits wisely, and most of all, stop smoking and drinking. Buy food for your babies instead. I am so pleased I taught my kids to cook at an early age, even my boys, and now they have no problem stretching the dollar," unquote. Mr. Speaker, I chose to quote extensively from Moira's passage to us because so often the greatest advice comes not from the experts and the purchase advisors, but actually from those wise souls all around us who have been through it and are still going through it. The reality is there will always be those who say that there is not enough in the government's budget for them. My brief overview of some of the essentials of Budget 2010 prove without doubt that there are some great initiatives included in this year's approach which really focus on those most in need. But there is also the evergreen message that ultimately, no matter how great our wealth, the biggest difference made can be in making the most of our resources and investing in the value of collective responsibility. It's all about whānau ora.